Hey everyone, and welcome back to another podcast. My name is John Venus, your host, and today I got a good friend with me. John, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here. So thank you for asking me to join you.
No, I'm super interested to have you on because you have so many different perspectives that I think are super fresh and not very common on the social media space. And you've been on social media for quite some time now, and you focus a lot of your efforts on helping a lot of people through your videos, through your own spiritual journey, and you also have your own charity, which we'll get into. And you spend a lot of time helping children in Africa, Tanzania more specifically. So why don't we just start off by just going a little bit into your background, how this whole journey started, and we'll go from there.
Okay, bit of a story, but I'll do my best. So I was kind of the opposite of what I am now. Is the best way I can describe it. I was living a very normal Western life, but not full. And I was working for myself. I was having my own business, and I'd achieved everything everyone said that I should be happy with. I had a nice flat in the city. I had a sports car. I went out and bought clothes whenever I want. I went out to bars and hotels to eat whenever I wanted, and I was just not happy. I was just not happy. And due to not being happy, I was using a lot of drugs as well at the time. I was using a lot of things like cocaine and ecstasy and weed and stuff like that. And anyway, I got to a point where I said something has to give way. And I started having this shift inside me. And I wanted to come off everything I was taking and clean my body. And I read about fasting, fasting just on water. So I decided I would embark on a water fast. But whilst all this was happening, I had this weird coincidence all the time with a number. 1111. I know a lot of people online talk about this, but I just kept seeing it, and I thought it was going a bit crazy. I kept seeing it all the time. And on the 11th of November 2011, I fasted, and I said I'll fast for 11 days. And whilst I was fasting, I was watching wildlife documentaries because I love African wildlife, and some children at the side, and I clicked the video, and it was a little boy and girl, brother and sister, called Sam and Esther, and they had polio, and they could only spin around in a circle. You could see the circle in the dust around them. They were just laid there on their own, spinning around, and it really broke my heart. And I said, someone should do something about that. And literally, as I said it, I heard a voice saying, "You're someone," and it freaked me out. And I closed the laptop, and I sat there, and I was like, "That's just your subconscious playing tricks on you. You're detoxing." But I was so upset. I was full of tears. I went online to find the organization who were looking after those children, who had found them, and they were in Uganda, and they were called Village to Village. And I accidentally applied for a different Village to Village in Tanzania. And funnily enough, there's a video on my channel about this, my 1111 story. I received on the 11th day of the email at 11:11 saying I should come to Tanzania and help them. And that was literally how it began, was that weird little set of events, because I had no intention of going to Africa until this YouTube video. And sure enough, I stopped my business, and I got rid of my home. I sold my car, and I boarded a plane to Africa to see what was going on. And here we are, many years later. I never left. Yeah, that's how I got to be anyway. Do you want
Yeah.
me to go further into it from there?
We'll definitely go further into it. But just on
Okay.
that note, I think it's a interesting thing to dive a little bit deeper, on what kind of psychologically, or what happened within you, inside you, to be able to let go of those things that us in a Western world put on a pedestal, like a safe income, a nice cozy car, enough cash to, buy drugs and have fun and party. So, what was the main thing that, changed within inside you that got you to be able to let go so easily of all these things?
I was very basically, I wasn't fulfilled at all. I grew up in one of the poorest areas of the UK, and there was a lot of drug use there. There still is a lot of drug use there. And I could see that people weren't necessarily happy. And I always thought if I escape this, I'll be happy. But then wasn't. And I think I kind of just came to the end of myself. I came to the end of this lie that I felt I'd been fed by a system, which was, you get these material gains, you get this stuff from the world, as I call it, these worldly things, and they'll make you happy. But it's just a bottomless pit of desire. You never ever fulfill it, never ever. And I just came to the absolute realization that I was in a bottomless pit and I couldn't possibly fulfill it. I couldn't fill that pit. And in doing that, I think I came to the end of myself. And I have a belief that when you come to the end of yourself in how I function, it's where God begins. And I feel that that's what happened, that something moved in me. Look around and I saw those children and I thought, they don't deserve that. In fact, I probably would deserve to be in that position more than them because they've never done anything wrong. And I'd cut corners to where I was. I hadn't stayed on the right side of the law all the time, etc. I've made no secret about that when I made my videos on YouTube. I've said that. And I just felt this overwhelming feeling of, well, how can that be okay? We make these decisions to get to where we are, and yet those children who have not made any decisions are just born into that suffering. And it just brought down everything about myself, everything I identified with, everything I thought I was down. And for that next, I spent around about, when that happened, I still didn't go for nearly 2 years to Tanzania. And I spent all of that time alone, just walking around in nature, just suss out who I was. And I couldn't. I just was totally down and just present and happy at the same time. But also, I knew something needed to go on with me. Something more than this had to occur, because what was I going to do? Start another business and achieve some sort of material gain and then be back where I was? So I knew something had to happen. And I think I just came to the end of myself. I just had enough. I'd hedonistically pursued everything, and it ruined me. It destroyed me. And then I felt that there was this loving forgiveness for me to start again. And I did indeed find that, and I did start.
And you talk a lot about spirituality, and you also go deep into religion in a lot of videos, and you
Yes.
you talk about it in a way that is easily digestible and from a perspective that is, I think, a little bit unusual for people who are very focused on Christianity or other religions to talk about. So, were you always, educated about religion? Did you grow up a very religious person, or did that
No.
come after that? You fell down that bottomless pit and came out the other side, or was it a slow and progressive journey that made you,
It,
you and your connection to the higher power stronger and stronger as time went along?
so it began with that fall. I was in that very same flat where I saw that video and had this whole change, and it tore everything down with me. I started fasting a lot and meditating and just trying to see what was going on. And I kept having these weird coincidences with numbers and with feathers as well. And of course, that stays now. The charity logo is a child blowing a feather. They just kept showing up at the most unbelievable times. And this one day I was fasting and I heard, it was in Newcastle city centre. If anyone's ever been to Newcastle in the northeast, I was living just off the city centre. this is not a place for spiritual enlightenment. It's not. It's just a very grey northern city in England. So I was hearing this music, and it was monks singing, Hare Krishna monks. So I went downstairs, and I'd been fasting like 9 days, and I went down. I was on the top. I lived in the top floor of a four-story town, and I went down like 6 flights of steps, and I was exhausted. I got to the bottom, and I sat on the steps. And sure enough, these monks were singing and dancing going down the street. And this guy, whose name I forget, he was from Paris. He was a Krishna monk. He came to me and he was like, "You look so peaceful." And I said, "I'm fasting. Maybe that's, what you're picking up on. I feel quite chilled because I'm fasting, quite euphoric." And he said, "Have you read the Bhagavad Gita?" And I just smiled and I said, "No, but I think I'm about to." And he handed me a Bhagavad Gita and he said, "We're giving these out today. People we think should get them." And he gave me that. And when I read that, I had some knowledge on Christianity, of course, growing up in the West. I had done all of that. But when I read that, it was very clear to me that these religions were not literal. We don't get. I mean, if you read Bhagavad Gita, there's Krishna who's a blue black boy. It's very clear to me there's no blue black boys in the world. This is not a literal story. And that was what triggered me into looking at the other layers of what these stories were telling us and looking at the truth behind things in the mystical and the mythological sense. And I was always more wired in that sense anyway. I've always been quite a cosmically minded child, etc., a bit out there, regardless of that event anyway. But when I had that Bhagavad Gita and I could then transplant that sort of pathway into other religions and look at people like Joseph Campbell, his work on mythology and the spiritual truth behind them, I just started from that place basically. And from there, I really feel it was led by spirit for myself because everything was synchronized. I kept having sort of, a Christian would call a revelation. I'd read things while I was in a state of prayer or fasting or truth, and I'd see it differently. And I carried on that journey, and then I started reading things about that were they're there for people to find, but they're not common. George W. Carey, who writes about the idea of the internal Christ within us. And off the back of reading that, I then stumbled across like-minded people like Santos Bonacci, who's online, covers these topics. Bill Donahue as well covers them. There's plenty more, but those are the two ones I would point towards. And they too had then expanded reading lists that you could look into. But I always have a thing where I say I don't like to grab a book from something. I always like to let a book come to me, and I still stick with that. It's why I don't recommend books on YouTube. People know about me. I don't like to recommend books because I think that they'll come after that Bhagavad Gita. I feel like the universe will give you it when you need it, at the right time. Yeah. So that is how it started. But I was like, really, that was so, to me, it was so nourishing to learn these things that day and night I was just studying that stuff. I didn't watch movies, no Netflix, nothing. I was just on that in that vortex of like trying to find the truth sort of thing in there. So yeah, I think that covers that one.
Yeah, no, it really makes sense, because it really shows in your videos that it's not just, paraphrasing a story and just, that's it, right? You're trying to get those layers to come forth. And I think me as a person who's, grown up in so many different parts of the world, the majority of them, I would say, at least for my generation, I don't think anyone learns much about religion anymore. Especially,
Yeah.
it's not something that is, it's kind of something that is more like taboo, and you don't want to be that kid who is interested in these things that are less popular, right? And
Yeah.
as kids, you always want to be seen as cool and socially acceptable, and these things. So unfortunately, society baskets religion in a pile, at least where I've grown up in. And the main criticism that I always heard growing up was that just look at the just read the Bible. It's ridiculous. Like, these characters, they're obviously not real. How can anyone believe this? It's stupid. So this is the kind of thing that is, like, repeated constantly, throughout the majority of people's childhood, at least, where I grew up, like in Norway
Yeah.
especially. Like, it's very unpopular to talk about religion, or to even support it or read it or take interest, even though everyone's like goes through confirmation there, which is just for the money and the and the presence at the end of the day. So it's
Yeah.
very strange, how the current state of religion for, I guess, people, at least from 30 years and younger, which is like my generation. I was always wondering what your perspective was on this. Like, what has happened, between, I don't know when this kind of trend started happening, probably way before, I was born, but why has it become so unpopular to talk about religion, and not as socially acceptable as before? Of course, in other parts of the world, it's much more acceptable. Even in the States, many parts in the US is much more acceptable, but in Europe specifically, it's taken a very different turn.
I I really put it down to, which is probably another out there view for many people, but cultural Marxism is how I see it. And it's evident when you look at the media. It depends on your worldview, but if you look at the media that we have, a great example, I think everyone's seen this, yeah. And you look at the example of the person who's close to God inside the Simpsons. This guy, the neighbor Ned. He's just you've seen, everyone's seen it. It's not cool. The children are the goons and geeks, and you don't bother with that. Then if you look to somewhere else in modern media like Friends, the airhead in Friends who has any connection with spirit and speaks about synchronicities and coincidences is Phoebe. And again, she's just put off as a fool, and that's in a nutshell what I mean with cultural Marxism. Is it's almost as if there's a societal yearning to dismantle the the family unit as a traditional sense, and in the state of the world we're in at present, the obvious risk to the loss of freedoms that this pandemic's going to create, etc.
Hmm.
You can start looking at the bigger picture on that as well. And I've looked at all this idea of dismantling the family unit. It sounds so like out there for many people I know, but this idea of having your population more controllable would require a dismantling of family unit in my eyes, because even as well, if you look to mainstream media, to the father figures in TV etc., are like the lovable oaf. They're not strong masculine figures, and it's all ebbing away, and children then look to their father in a different sense to that. And of course, traditional values of having a strong family unit and having morality, etc., based on that are being eroded. And people say, well, we're just evolving and we're getting more freedom. I say I feel it's being steered, basically.
Hmm.
Because these days, for instance, many young people think I did when I was younger. I'm 35 for the record. But when I was even, I thought sex was totally harmless. And these days, I know it, with a wife, etc. I have a wife and I have a son, and my wife's pregnant. But when you're young, what I mean by that is multiple partners is totally harmless, and it's not totally harmless. But I grew up watching Friends. You look at something like Friends, which is steeped with cultural Marxist concepts. The most lovable and endearing character and carefree is Joey. And Joey is a sex addict and a glutton. The two things you definitely cannot be and remain a lovable, jovial character is a
Yeah.
sex addict and a glutton. It's not true. But you watch that and you think, yeah, okay. And you end up going out and following the crowd, you get drunk, you have all of this. And I
Hmm.
say that's all steered, basically. I don't think it's organic.
Hmm.
I don't think it's a natural progression. I think certain systems on the planet wanted that, is my belief. And
Yeah.
they wanted the erosion of the strength that the traditional family unit had, and also the ability, if you want to control something, you need to be able to predict it. If you want to hunt an animal, you need to be able to predict the way it moves. You need to know its physical instincts.
Hmm.
If you've got a whole mass of people set on the high morality of things, if they can be to the best of their ability, then you can't start flooding the world with things like pornography, which has disabled and paralyzed millions, if not billions, of men all over the planet who could be out there doing something with their lives, but they're not. They're just sitting one after another in a tank, which they're paying to live in, and watching that stuff. Uh, I think those things wouldn't have rose up inside a world where the family hadn't sort of been dismantled in that sense. And that's how I perceive it. I don't think it's an organic thing. I think there are religions that oppose that behind those persons as well, because I'm quite well studied on those religions.
Hmm.
And Rosicrucian Luciferians basically is where that begins. And many people, it sounds a little bit conspiratorial. It's absolutely not. You just need to look at things like the street maps of Washington, D.C. to understand who built these cities and these systems. And even if it starts with a good intention, as much as it did,
Hmm.
then corruption exists inside all of us. We know that all men can be corrupted. So eventually, corruption can express itself, and the ends justify the means is a viewpoint of many of those religions. So they just, okay, if we can try and do this, it's the best thing for the planet, and thus our end goal justifies this steering of the culture using media, etc., etc., which to me has a spiritual foundation as well, because
Hmm.
I do perceive that there's a negative spiritual force behind that as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about conspiracy theories, right? So, like, I've always
Yeah.
been confused about that because who, like, what sets a conspiracy theory apart from just, a regular theory? Who decides what is a conspiracy? Who decides what is a sound theory? And the issue for me that always comes up is, shouldn't we as a society be able to question everything equally and have debates and talk openly about everything, no matter how far off it sounds? But you can see, like, even now during this virus, there big channels like London Real being censored, and content being taken down, and
Yeah.
topics being banned from talking about in the media, and these things. So um I was always curious about what makes something a conspiracy and what makes something just a okay
Well,
theory.
I think it's good to say, for me, the conspiracy is, to some degree, are surrounding the idea of conspiracy theories. It's probably better to say there's a conspiracy around that those two words have been presented to humanity. Because now when
Exactly.
you say, you know what I mean? Because when you say conspiracy, everyone's like, uh-oh, cuckoo,
Yeah.
and they don't take any note anymore as soon as you hear it's a conspiracy theory. They say
Hmm.
it's nonsense. And in actual fact, I mean, that's the truth is best hidden in plain sight. That's a great way to hide the truth, by manufacturing that inside humanity that responds to those words, which the media has managed to do.
Hmm.
However, at the same time, humanity has managed to do that as well, because some of us get so into the emotional vacuum of things that we just believe everything. And I try to, I'm making a video about this, but I posted the other day about people sharing regarding mandatory vaccines, how conspiracy theorists have shot themselves in the foot, because they've set up many petitions and movements to try and stop mandatory vax. And I'm for that. I'm opposed to mandatory vax. And I'm definitely opposed to the dubious history of Bill Gates and his determination to vaccine everyone. And I'm opposed to having a pass to travel, because you have to do that in Africa already. If you want to travel to some countries, you need a vaccine pass.
Right.
So Africa's like a experimental ground in some sense. So I'm opposed to that. But what I was saying to them was, if you want this to work, you have to tell the truth. And what people were saying, they were going to his TED talk where he says he's going to reduce population with vaccines. And
Mhm.
they're basically using that to gain signatures by saying he's going to poison people with this vaccine. It's not what he's saying. What it's a known academic belief that if you improve healthcare and you improve the uh, child mortality rate, so if children die, culturally the behavior will change and people will have smaller families. Because in Tanzania, where I've lived nearly a decade now, I know people will have a larger family. Historically, they were having larger families because they feared children wouldn't make it to adulthood. And when you become elderly, you need a child. You need your family to look after you because there's no government support. So it's survival. It's important. So the idea is that they can, instead of this curve of large families, because everyone's fearful the children will die, so they have 8 children, hoping at least 4 of them get to be adults, that they change that behavior. And in changing that behavior, pull that curve. And I was trying to explain that that's what he's referring to. He's not sitting in a room full of Satanists who didn't respond to him saying he's going to kill people with vaccines. But then people are so emotionally into it, they go after you. No, supporting him. I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm actually opposed to him. But I'm trying to say that you're creating holes inside your own ability to stop this because your petitions are void off the back of signatures based on using that sort of mentality, that falsely luring people, false information. And I think humanity in itself also has helped to create the word conspiracy theory into a negative way by examples like that, behaviors like that, by not double checking what they're saying and just once they believe something going into it. And I think as well, it's often there's a lot of psychology behind it. Of course, it's like the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. You've got to have like this opposing force, and it's up to you to overcome that opposing force, and that's what many people get pulled into. So nothing can be believed. So the opposing force is the general consensus, and thus the general academic consensus is not to be believed at all. And thus you become part of this hero's journey. You see, you're part of it now. Become a conspiracy theorist, and many
Yeah.
people have a survival void, so they don't get that stimulation. It's missing. That's why we get people getting on ice cream, things like that, because they have a missing survival void and they look for that stimulus. So junk light is now kind of replacing the truth, and many people get really into the algorithm on conspiracies,
Yeah.
and when they get pulled in, they start fulfilling a survival inside them. And I learned this living in the bush. You hear a twig crack out in the bush in Africa, and you go on alert. What's that? Is it a leopard? Is it a lion? A snake? You wait, nothing happens. Everybody comes down. I live with Maasai tribe, which we can get onto, but
Yeah.
I see that it does something with you chemically. You get something from that, and most of us have lived lives where we don't have that, so we are given that via movies, via computer games, etc.
Mhm.
But many people are given it through there, so they get totally hooked on it. But then because you're hooked on it, you're almost in a frenzied state, I feel, and you end up so focused on it, you forget to focus on solution. And thus,
Mhm.
because you get so focused, the way you feed into it and all the false information that can come out, people not being correctly balanced while they do that, also kind of wrecks the term conspiracy theory. If you ask me, it plays into wrecking it as well as the media.
Like I used to think when I was a kid that grown-ups had it all figured out. They know how the world works. It's easy. There are a set of rules that everyone plays by, and it's fair. But the more you dig into the information, the more you look, the more you understand how there are less and less coincidences than you thought before, right? It's no coincidence that all these Hollywood movies are coming out about a certain topic at a certain time. They have similar messaging and similar kind of ways of normalizing certain situations and behavior, right? And
Yeah.
media is, of course, it's, probably the most powerful tool of manipulation. So it's kind of very naive to believe that no one is, trying to take advantage of that, whoever, those people are, or, organizations,
Yeah.
countries, governments. It's kind of, it's too naive to me to believe that no one is trying to use media to try to, steer people subconsciously in one way or another, right? And create conflict, create wars, justify whatever else. So I think most people who are watching or listening to this podcast do understand it, because a lot of people who are watching have gone into, one of these many rabbit holes. A lot of people who are watching are vegan, and they have, kind of realized certain things, and, certain manipulations from the media in terms of our relationship to food, for example.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people will be open to the message that we're talking about today. I want to go a little bit more
Certainly.
in depth into your your story with getting to Tanzania and, creating this charity,
Okay.
ShareTanzania, which is, an amazing charity. It has a beautiful story behind it, and, I'm a big supporter of it. And I just want you to, just so we can get more perspective in our lives, because it's easy to, be stressed about our jobs, and it's all about, relative perspective, right? And we have the right to be stressed about our first world problems. But in Africa, and with the kids that you've worked with and the children that you work with, the reality is very different, and there is a very harsh reality to it. And you've, chosen to help these children who are most in need in these rural areas, that otherwise, if you didn't go there and help them, they would they wouldn't, be there. So I want you to, just explain what the charity is, how you came up with the idea of starting your own charity, Share Tanzania, and what you've learned through working with them so long.
So, uh, first of all, I really don't feel like I came up with the idea, because I really feel like it was a God thing, totally, 100%. I had no desire to help children. I had no desire to be in Africa. And then all of what I explained earlier happened, and I went there. When I got there, I arrived to a failed NGO, non government organization, like a charity, a failed charity called Village to Village. The guy in charge was corrupt. He was not a nice character. And there was only him and one other and me. But I had gone off the website from their glory days and thought it was great. And when I got there, I thought, oh, I should leave. So I immediately thought I should leave. Like I arrived in a very, very poor house in the middle of the night, in Africa. I'd never been. And then I met this guy, and I just had a bad, quite intuitive, I just had a horrible feeling about him from the get go. But what happened was, all I did was I stuck it out. I truly believed that I'd been called to do something there, and I didn't know what. And the result was that within 6 months, the guy couldn't get any money, because I took over getting all the UK donors. I emailed them all, and I said, stop sending money to his account, because I don't trust it's going to where it should. And many of them cancelled. We had no income. We had like £200 a month income or something after 6 months. It was ridiculous. And in 6 months, he was just left, and he said, well, look at what are we doing? And I said, I think you should just leave, because I mean, I let you be anything inside here, and I'm controlling the funds coming in now. Even though it was a small amount out there, it was enough to have a conversation about. And he left. And in leaving, I was handed the registration for this NGO that had failed, and the land and the house. And I then got in contact with the founder, who was a doctor, PhD in the development of Tanzania in English. And I told her where I was, and that I wanted to bring this up off its knees, and that I wanted to focus on the child laborers that I was seeing, because that was the first thing that caught me deep in my heart, first thing that was so apparent. And she had a development in the UK that was on its way to being closed. And she said, I'll make you the chairman of that trust. If you're giving 100% of your life to this village, then I'll make you the chairman and you can use the UK charity. So all of a sudden I had an NGO in Africa and the UK charity off the back of following this number. And the UK charity was just a framework to bring money in. There was no money there. It was just a way to fundraise online. So then it was just me and that one other guy called Ali. And we went around on a beat up motorbike looking for children in the quarries, because there's a lot of quarries around, a lot of child laborers. And we would just get the children, take a photo, write it all down. I'd post them on Facebook and try to get them support. But initially, I should say, initially what happened was I opened a Facebook to bring Christmas to the village because I was sick of seeing all the kids playing with the rubbish on the streets. They were always climbing around in the rubbish to find something to play with. So I said, let's have a Christmas fundraiser. That's fun. And the Facebook page got a little traction. There was like 400 or 500 likes on the page. And on New Year's Day, I said, this girl needs to go to school and doesn't have a sponsor. Would anyone like to sponsor her? And a lady replied called Madeline, who I know personally from a raw vegan potluck that I used to go to when I was raw vegan. And she said, I'll do it. I'll sponsor her. And what do I do? And I was like, I don't know. I don't have anything, like no PayPal. I don't have any way for you to send me the money. But I just was taking the step, you know, it's just, you don't have to see the whole staircase, take the first steps. I was just taking steps and it was just kind of happening. I was just in the present moment and just doing it and following my nose a little bit, following my heart a bit. And bit by bit, it all got bolted on. I learned how to build a website because we had no money and I had to suss out that. And we just got to this point where after the first year, we had 111 children out of child labor. But at the same time as doing that, I love dogs. In Tanzania, I'm called Baba Wanyama, which means father to the animals, because I'm always rescuing animals. And this is my YouTube second name that you can't say properly. And for the year it was over, I had 20 rescue dogs and 111 children in and 111 children in school. So I was like, I need to open an animal rescue because I couldn't even afford to feed them properly, and I couldn't afford to give the tick medication properly. I was like, I need to fundraise for that too. So I started Kilimanjaro Animal Rescue, which currently has like more than 100 dogs living there at the moment. So after 1 year, we just had this early framework was in place. And then I just carried on the journey, identifying what does. And what happened was kind of the need came to me to show me how the charity should expand. And for instance, a single mother with a special needs, a 3-year-old cerebral palsy girl strapped on her back, came to my gate and said, I'm homeless, help me. So I didn't know what to do. And I said, let me look around and see if there's something I can find for you and your child to go to. And the only options in Tanzania was to separate them. And I said, if she's homeless and has the baby still, they shouldn't be separated. Clearly, she loves her so much, she's let herself go homeless. Many people abandon special needs children there, you know. Mm-hmm. So I started Featherstale Children's Village, which is a community for single mothers with special needs children to come. They can live inside the community. They can be left in communal care. They go out to work or whilst they work as employed for us. Because who's the best caregiver is a mother who has a special needs child for the other children who were abandoned as well. So that was how that got started. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of having a children's home started because my first son, as I call him, Dominic, his whole family passed away sadly, and he was in the children's fund with the child labourers, and they just came. It's a very strange story. The day before, I wanted to eat so badly, and every time I went to eat, I didn't want to eat. And I said, this is really weird. Like, I was hungry, but every time I went to, I spat it out. It didn't taste good. And on the night I was doing yoga, and I felt so light, and I heard a voice say, take my children into your home. Like, I heard it so clear, and I was so baffled by it. And the next morning, the social came and said, there's a boy, Dominic, do you remember him? And I said, yes, I do. He's sleeping outside. because all his family have now passed away and he's on his own. So I said, he has to live with me. And the social worker was like, what? Where's that come from? I went, no, I'm telling you, he has to live with me. Like I had this epiphany last night, as it were. So that was how the children's home started, was off the back of that. So it wasn't like I had a plan. I was just there and present and offering myself to help with what was happening around us. And the other big project we have in the charity is Angels Gate Home, which is for street children. So those are boys who have seen a lot, you know, a lot of them have confessed to murder and problems of this nature. I'm concerned that this umbrella is going to shift. I'll move it in a second.
That's okay.
In the light. They've had a very serious treatment, been involved with drugs, crime. You know, they've struggled. Not all, but some of them. Some confessed to murder and stuff of this nature. And most of them are rape victims from grown men who were addicted to heroin. They raped children on the streets there, unfortunately. And that began, I was with Fritzi. Her friend was visiting from Hamburg, which is where I am at the moment. And over, Fritzi's my wife, over Fritzi's shoulder, I saw a boy in the town outside the supermarket with very dirty clothes. And they said, what should we do next? Not implying anything about work, meaning should we go home? Should we go and get a juice somewhere? And I said, I need to talk to that boy. So I went to talk to him, and his name was William. Turned out he was a street involved child. And then we met his friend a week later, and I had to open a centre for street involved children off the back of that as well. Yeah. And it was amazing. Within 2 weeks, we had the money to open a centre. We 26-bedroom property fell into our lap. So yeah, it wasn't something that I necessarily planned. I always say I emptied myself and I let the desires of God become my own desires. He filled my heart with his desires. That's how I see it.
That is yeah, go for it. Yeah, you can do it while I talk here. But you know, the reason why I'm such a big supporter of John is because, as he just said, is, you know, his willingness to give himself to these people that are in a lot of need, right? You know, that is what attracted me to the whole concept. Yeah, no worries. You're good. Yeah, no, I was just telling everyone how, you know, the selflessness and the you going there without a plan is extremely inspiring. And you know, I'm sure it will inspire a lot of people who are listening today to, you know, look at things from a little bit of a different perspective. And maybe, you know, a lot of people can realize that you don't always have to have a plan. You don't always have to know exactly what life is gonna bring to you. A lot of people, myself included in the past, you know, are all about setting goals and just like tunnel vision, you know, achieve this, achieve that. But by allowing, you know, whatever is flowing naturally to come to you, you've achieved so much. And, you know, I'm sure, as you said before, these children would be separated without you, you know, they wouldn't be getting the help that they're getting now if someone didn't come along and help, right? So maybe you can explain a little bit, you know, of the situation, especially specifically in Tanzania, in terms of, you know, what would happen to these children or a lot of these children if you didn't provide the help that you're providing through, you know, generous donations and of course your time and effort on a daily basis.
First of all, I just want to say I really don't feel I'm selfless. I just want to say I really feel I feel it's more selfish because I enjoy what I'm doing, and I was very, very selfish in my younger life, and I should give something back to humanity is how I see it. Right. I just want to say that anyway. You know, there's a saying. I'm not saying I'm a saint, except by birth name. My birth name is Saint Julian, but they say a saint is a sinner who never gave up, and that's my attitude. You know, it is that I've been in the depths of the worst place you could get to, and thus kind of I don't feel it's selfless. I feel kind of honored that I get to do this, do this work sort of things.
I really like the perspective, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. So the children, it depends on which umbrellas typically. Hold on. There we go. The children. It depends which. So I'll start with we have an education fund where you can support a child with full-time education, and those children are predominantly in child labour. So without school, they are set in a sentence of child labour in a quarry, pretty much. If they're a girl, they'll end up being a house girl, which is akin to a slave, really, in Western terms. It's like a slave. You just live in someone's house who's wealthy and do everything for them. So for those children without support, aside from the extreme high risk of mortality due to the fact that they're working in these quarries or handling mercury and gold mines and all that sort of stuff, then they have a life sentence. There's no hope, basically. And they work hard. Like, you can't believe how hard they work. You know, they work like 10 hours a day, breaking rocks in a quarry, and all they're getting is maize flour and beans to survive, to fuel them to do the next day. They're not putting money away, you know. Most of them are sleeping on a concrete floor. They're just suffering dreadfully. When they get support from us, they get access to medical care firstly, which is very important. Such a high infant mortality rate out there for silly things like not having less than $1 for antibiotics for typhoid. 1 in 3 children, because they can't find that dollar for the antibiotic. So they get school, full-time education. From there, they can obviously start choosing where they want to go with their life. We've got children now who are going into college, university as well. And it just alters the whole course of their life for those children, for the child laborers. If they have parents as well, it obviously gives an opportunity for the parents to find some healing as well. Because you can imagine, I see it as a father having to take your child to a quarry whilst your neighbour's children are going to school. It really has an impact on the parent as well. And it can even help, I've seen, reduce things like alcohol abuse and stuff like that, because there seems to be some healing from that. My child's in school, you know, they're no longer with me in the quarry. I don't need to numb out anymore. Yes, I have to work there, but at least they have some hope. So there's that side for those children. For the street, I'll end with the special needs because it's the biggest topic. For the street involved boys, the life on the street is just horrific. Like I said, most are rape victims. Most are involved in drugs. Many get involved in violent crime. Most die young if they stay out there from heroin, etc. And if you don't bring them in, then basically they are going to join. There's only one space unless some miracle happens and someone else pulls them out. Those men I speak about who were raping the boys on the street, they were once street children too. They were forgotten, you know. So you can kind of see where they might well have just gone to become like those men, injecting, etc. And we have a lot of children heroin rehabilitation over the years. We had some even as young as 11 intravenous heroin, you know, like totally hooked on it. Didn't even addicted. They forgot how it works, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we use it as medicine because if we use it, we get sick with a withdrawal." You know, so they just, you know, and these older guys needed a fix, so they were getting the kids hooked and then saying, "Hey, if you need it, you've got to come to me," so they could take off them.
Yeah.
So you can see that path where it goes dark. It's very, very dark. Now, however, we have the music school. We've got boys going into full-time employment. We've got boys living the dream who were once 4 years ago. I've got a boy who was homeless. He's just moved to Zanzibar Island, which is paradise, and he's working in a 5-star hotel. He gets enough tips to build a house out there, you know. So like his life is just incomparable to what it was when he was sleeping on the market stall, under the market stalls. What the boys would do, they'd go where the market had been cooking maize and stuff. They'd sleep on the ground underneath because the fire had heated the ground up, so they'd sleep there at night. Sad fish. So then we have our normal children who would have kind of ended up as child laborers or as house girls, the normal children who don't. I don't like to use the word orphan, by the way. I think it affixes stigma or orphanage to the children for life. So I just say children have parents or guardians look after them. I just prefer using a few more words because I just found the word orphan kind of sticks with people. It's not healthy to stick, oh, I'm an orphan. You know, you're not. You're a human being. You just that
Yeah.
many parents around, you know. It's just a thing I have. So if you're, I'm not using that term. So for those guys, the able-bodied children, it probably would have been one of those two directions. And we have those living at this table as well in designated housing, sometimes mixed housing with the special needs children. The special needs children is a massive topic, but I'll try to condense it. There's a huge level of abandonment. A lot of the special needs children are abandoned. They get left to die, locked away in sheds. I've personally, I mean, even recently, if you look at the videos of us finding children locked in the dark, etc., I've personally found children who were tied up for more than a decade inside sheds where animals were, the neighbours didn't even know existed. I've seen a girl who could only meow like a cat because she'd been locked in a room for 15 years and
Wow.
only a cat was coming in. So
Mm.
now she's at Featherstale. She gardens. She's very happy. Her name's Flora. You know, she's put on a lot of weight because she loves her food after all the years of starvation. So the alternative is often just hell, basically. You know, the children get, there's such a cultural lack of education. People think that they're demonically possessed when they're special needs. They think they need to be starved to get the devil out of them, or they're just plain neglected. Or some families just can't cope because you have a single mother who needs to work to feed herself, so the child just gets left at home all day because where else can they go?
No.
So for those children, death is, last year before last year, I fell sick and we were supposed to go and see two children. Just to give you a harsh example of the alternatives if they don't come with us. We're supposed to go see two children and the driver wasn't well, so we couldn't go. So they were waiting on me. And we ended up, because I was unwell, it was like 10 days before we got there. And from the beginning of that and me getting unwell in that 10 days, both children passed away. So
Wow.
you can see, like, you know, I mean, obviously for me, it was very tough that I was ill and I was like, oh, if I hadn't been, sometimes I think it's just meant to be. Sometimes, you know, some of the children, the suffering they've gone through, perhaps it's more peaceful where they depart to, you know. And the alternative is often death for many of those special needs
Mm-hmm.
children. Sadly, at the same time, I've had police come to my gate with a child, not just one time, and said, please will you protect this child because the witch doctors kidnap her, sacrifice her. Like, so the first one's a little girl called Nimzana, and that was like 2014 or 15, I think. The
Mm-hmm.
police brought her. And that was my first experience of knowing about this. I knew, and the world knows, that the witch doctors go after albino children in Tanzania. It's like a worldwide scandal often from time to time on the news. And the government are doing great tackling it, but they also go after special needs children. And nobody knows about that. And the danger to children out there, there was one who was not on our social work outreach, but like 20 kilometers away. It's called Same, and there was cerebral palsy just sitting outside the house, and the mother went to the shop, came back, and the child had gone, just
Mm-hmm.
disappeared. And the presumption is that it's people taking them for the witch doctor ceremonies, sadly. So there's that side of it as well. Not to focus on the negative, because the beauty is in Featherstale, they're safe. You know, they're getting education. They have full-time teachers. Once they get educated to some degree in the village, then they go to boarding schools, special boarding schools around the country for special needs children, often run by churches out there. Those children who are malnourished and sick, etc., when we get them, obviously they get to restore their health. And I always say, you know, when I see the children in Featherstale, the special needs children, because they're like the biggest focus, the biggest job is obviously having more than 70 special needs children in one location, all with varied special needs, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, spina bifida, blindness, Asperger's, you know, everything is there. then that is the biggest work front for all of us. But to go in there and see it, I always say it's like a microcosm. I wrote this the other day as well, of what the world can be, because those children have no idea about the boogeyman. Most of them are either forgotten about the boogeyman or they haven't met the boogeyman. Thankfully, you know what I mean. Like they don't fear the media because they don't get exposed to it. They don't worry about tomorrow because they trust us. They have faith that we're going to deliver. Maybe I sometimes worry I'm not going to deliver the food, but that's on me. You know that's how if we can do that on a small scale, a village that we've built, then we can do it on a global scale without any shadow of a doubt. Is how I perceive it. So.
100%.
But
I
yeah,
really
without
want,
support,
yeah,
I
I
just
just
want.
wanted to go for it. Go for it.
I was just say, and without support from people, we can't do any of it. And the first time, just so your audience know, I know you're humble and don't say it, but the first time I knew who John was, and the first time I knew he was sort of interacting with us is when I received a sizable donation from someone saying John Venus, and I was like, is that the John Venus from? Yeah, so it's okay and all well said and done. Oh wow, you built that village, and as I say, I totally was guided by God to do all of it. Like I didn't have any plans to do all of it, and I can only do it because people all over the world agree that something should be done, and
Yeah.
how all of this is. Its foundation is the love of humanity and the love of God to myself
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and I do want to encourage anyone, who is, has the means to support these projects, such as, Share Tanzania and the work that you're doing. I urge, anyone who's able to, help out, because a lot of times people think that they don't have enough to help, and that, their extra $20 is not going to make a big change in someone's life. But imagine thousands of people donating $20, on a consistent basis. It all adds up. So there is no too small of a helping hand or too small of a donation. I don't think so.
I
um,
I can take a child out of child labor for $4.
$4, did you say?
Yeah, for $4 a week. So I
Wow.
always say less than a takeaway coffee from Starbucks a week. I can get a
Yeah.
child out of child labor and into school with
Yeah.
our system that we have.
That
So I
is
mean,
the power that we have in our hands, and we have the opportunity to help. And in case anyone's wondering and is ready to take action, how can they make a donation right now to help these children out? What is the best and most efficient way for them to do that right now, this second?
yeah, just go to ShareTanzania.com and /donate, and then donate specifically to projects, etc. We have a fundraiser ongoing to assist immunocompromised children as well during the pandemic, because the virus is now starting to hit hard in Tanzania, and there are so many HIV children, TB children, children who have just had surgery and stuff of this nature, and they can't even afford soap. So it's a very difficult situation. Many families are having to go into the busy markets to get food, and we're trying to, with a team we've put together, we're trying to ensure that we can stop those high risk families having to the build up areas. So there's that as well. The link, you'll find it under any of my YouTube videos.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
got
also
its own
put it
link.
on the description of this video as well, and on
So
social
yeah,
media, so you guys
good.
can easily check that out. So that brings me to a big question, I think, because the coronavirus is going around. There is this global fear.
Yeah,
There's this whole, oh, like, let's be super careful. Like, everyone's afraid of contracting this disease and or passing it on to someone else, right? But and this is being talked about all the time, nonstop. It's all people talk about on social media. It's all people talk about the news,
yeah,
on a global scale that I've never experienced before in my lifetime, right? But at the same time, even though it's not to be taken lightly and it's a very serious issue, why are we, as a as humans, why are we, as wealthier countries, first world countries, why are we not taking these much higher death tolls and much higher numbers of people who are even starving every single year, and dying of famine. Why are we so disconnected from that in the Western world, and kind of ignore it? Like, is there a reason for that, do you think?
I think we've been sort of raised to accept it. You know, in developing countries, every day, 2,800 people die of diarrhea every day.
That's
You
crazy.
know, I've witnessed death firsthand in Tanzania. Naturally, uh, I've had close calls myself. Malaria. I've seen people die of malaria. I've had malaria 3 times. And I think it just becomes socially accepted. We just say it's acceptable, and people are doing something about it. And that's where I say it's not acceptable. Actually, I don't find it acceptable. And I think if I could have the whole world population walk a mile in my shoes and have a child die in your arms, then you'd say it's not acceptable as well. Quite simply, you
Exactly.
just would not. You would say it's just not acceptable. But we are disconnected from it. And I wrote something the other day saying that in the UK we have 7 out of every, I think it's every 100,000 childbirths, 7 result fatality. Whereas in Tanzania that figure is like 100 times larger because of lack of facilities, because of lack of support, lack of equipment. And the number one cause of death in women in Tanzania is childbirth and pregnancy, to give you an idea. Like that out trumps everything, heart disease, everything. And I said the world has accepted that that's okay because we've accepted a certain quality of life off the back of that. And we also at the same time we forget that Europe, not to I don't this is not colonial guilt, I'm not interested in that, but Europe and America is powerful off the back of Africa. Yeah, the world took from it and didn't give as much back. It's underdeveloped due to it.
Hmm.
And I think we're just totally disconnected from that reality because it's not shown to us. The media is not reporting on it. It's not showing. If the media would get in such a hysteric breaking news, this is happening about Africa, the world might well reunite and say this is not right. Something has to be done. But instead, you're limited to charities trying to afford to buy some advertising to get into that main flow of consciousness. Or like myself, I've used Facebook and social media to some degree to bring that reality into other person's
Hmm.
realities as well. And I think we're just exposed to the narrative that is required. As to go back to the conspiracy stuff, the media is exposing us to the narrative it requires.
Hmm.
It's not exposing us to the truth, because if it were exposing us to the truth, we'd all be appalled at what is happening around the world. We'd all be
Hmm.
appalled at the fact that because we choose to have a certain life quality, or we choose to have these certain non-utilitarian parts of our world in Europe, etc., we actually take resources that could be used elsewhere to end
Hmm.
great suffering. And I think to feed that story into a consumerist capitalist system is extremely dangerous for those who have the power and the money to feed the story in.
Hmm.
The system probably would start buckling as people start checking their conscience and saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, is yeah." And I think that's where it's coming from. Basically, it's
No, I can definitely agree with that. And it's the cliche saying, follow the money. Like it works
yeah,
for almost everything, right? Who's gonna gain from, like, helping every starving child and every sick person in developing countries? It's definitely not the people who are in charge in the Western world, right? So and also it ties a little bit, with the whole vegan movement as well. Like, it's also it's strange that that has become so popular, and there's so much focus on animal rights and veganism, although it's still a very fringe movement. It gives me hope
yeah,
for us to be able to use the same logic, the same kind of mindset towards other extremely serious problems like, you know, all the you know, sex trafficking, you know, slavery, all kinds of stuff that is actually happening, that, you know, right in front of us that we don't want to see, or that is, you know, it's hiding in plain sight, like you're saying. So the if anything, from, you know, going down this rabbit hole of learning about how the corporations work, and how science is bought by corporations, and you know, science is tweaked and you know, skewed in the wrong direction by the pharma industry and all these things, it gives me hope that enough people will eventually, you know, get out of that bubble and try to, you know, go for, you know, and take action based on what their heart is saying, and not ignore these things. Because like, you know, it's not enough to, you know, be vegan and just, you know, eat tofu and you know, pasta all day and just carry on living life as usual. Like, it's veganism, or, you know, eating a plant-based diet is amazing, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't give you, you know, enough of a reason to just, you know, be content with the rest of the world. You know, there are so many issues, so many problems that we can look into, and just because there are so many problems doesn't mean that, you know, we should be paralyzed by all these, you know, different options and ways of approaching it, right? I think it's important to educate ourselves as much as we can, and just keep digging and keep supporting each other and everyone who's trying to help out for a better cause. And I think that, you know, you're playing an instrumental role. Of course, like you're saying, it's difficult for you to, even though your work is just amazing, I love it so much, it's hard for you to, you know, get the exposure that you need. Because again, even, you know, celebrities are, I'm sure they're discouraged, you know, maybe, you know, personally, politically, you know, whatever the reason is. But, you know, there the other podcasts and big podcasts and celebrities are, you know, not talking about this stuff. They're not bringing people like you on board as often as, you know, soccer stars or whoever else, right? And it's a
Yeah.
big problem. And I hope that, you know, the more people wake up to this, there'll be there'll be more and more demand. And who knows, maybe you know, these things will be at the forefront of mainstream media. Probably not, but, you know, wishful thinking. At least social media, right? At least we can try getting big social media stars and outlets to talk more about this eventually. And I think it will happen, you know, with the help of people like you and whoever is watching and listening to this and wants to take action right now.
I just so you know, I already kind of see that this occurring. The land that Featherstale is, half of Featherstale, the children's village, it's called Featherstale Children's Village. Half of that land that it's built on was bought anonymously by a Premier League footballer.
Oh, no way.
So yeah. So I kind of have some connection to at least know that there is, you know, some people out there have that, you know, that, and I'm close friends with that family now as well, which is beautiful, and they've helped again and again. But I haven't spoken to them about making public what's sort of, they've never, I'll
Hmm.
have that conversation eventually, so you might all
Yeah.
learn who that is. But I
Yeah.
want to say, interesting thing, I think the reason veganism works so well, why so many people get drawn into it and feel, okay, I can do this to bring a change. I think if I can use a metaphor, the we're all sitting around this. Imagine we're all sitting around this campfire, and that's kind of our way of life in the West. Okay, like we have a standard home, we shop at the supermarket, money from the economy, and our shelter, our safety is inside the core of that, our home, which is supported by that economy. Now, if you offer someone a way to change the world while staying inside that home, staying inside around that campfire, then you're creating the element of safety because you're still staying in your own environment, but something that you can reach with your hand. Okay, I do this I eat every day in my home, in my castle. I can change the way I eat. So you have this very close knit way that you can actually have an impact. And I think that's why it works so well. And I think the reason things not working well is to go back to this. I always say Facebook is a virtual campfire. Okay. So we're all sitting around our home campfire, all eating anywhere. and someone says, hey, you can have a positive impact by changing what you eat. So we do. And that's why I think there's so much passion and movement with the vegan movement. But then when it comes to the other problems, like the way the system, corruption, poverty, inequality, you have this other fire. And you can see this fire
Mm-hmm.
and it's burning, and everyone's focused on it and saying, this is a dreadful fire. But as you're looking at it, you're like throwing wood at it because you're giving it your energy, you know, you're making the fire bigger. And realistically, what everyone's trying to say is, I want to build a new fire. And this fire is going to be better. It's going to warm our children and so on and so forth. And it's going to be fine. But to do that, you have to come out of your castle. Yeah, you've got to come out of your where you're eating comfortably with your friends, looking at that fire or this potential new fire. And I think that's where we have stumbling points for me too when I was younger, is we're always looking at the old fire, especially in the current, we're looking at the system, the free going to rob from us, and we're saying, this is not fair, it's not right. But what we do is, instead of doing anything about it, we just tell other people on Facebook, a virtual campfire. We just tell other people, I use a lot of fires in my analogy, but we just tell other people hoping someone's going to change it. When in actual fact, what we all want to do is build a new one. All know what has to be done. We need a system. We need to build a, you know, some fresh way for humanity where it's fair, where it's more equal. And I think veganism well, because you never have to really ask people to go too deep into thought, into ideas, or changing what they are to make that change. And that's why it can bolster such popularity. But when it comes to tackling something like poverty or inequality, you can't really do that from your castle. And thus, to make people feel like it, we have like these algorithms and people sharing videos and posts. And now you have this pressure valve where you're in your home and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm part of the change of inequality now as well. But you're not. You're just sharing information to other people who are staying in their castle. You know, and I think finding a way to get people organized to start focusing their energy on building the new fire instead of throwing wood at the old one and telling everybody about the old one is the next step for humanity. Because where do we go from that? We need infrastructure. We need to change things. Everyone's complaining. Many people complain, for example, I had this the other day, complaining that the rich are the ones who should deal with it. And they've created this pandemic to steal our rights and all of this, which is probably some truth that rights will be stolen off the back of this. But at the same time, they were in the attitude that they didn't care about children in Africa. Right. I've had a few people do this because they just want to look after their own family. So in actual fact, you see, they're sitting complaining about the high up guy saying he doesn't care about me. And then they're looking down at the person who's lower than them on the economic scale saying, I don't care about them. Yeah, so the problem's here, you know, the problem is right here. And I think that's the beauty of veganism, is it's easy in your castle without going out, you know, and changing too much to start making a change with yourself, and you can reach it. You know, whereas if I bring you any other activism for predominantly, how do you reach into doing a change that's like applicable with, for instance, gender equality from your castle? You'd have to go out and build something and do something, you see? And that's what I've always thought about veganism, is that's why it can bolster such popularity, is that it can be reached and held by people. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I completely agree with that. And I think unless we as, you know, a society or, you know, as humans get together and make, you know, sharing something cool to make, you know, sacrifice a part of the conversation to, you know, be more, you know, willing to give up parts of your own wealth or your own time or however you want to, you know, serve, like just service in general. Like if we can make that part of the conversation and a cool part of young people's way of living, I think that a lot more can happen, because you know, all change, you know, requires someone to, you know, give up something, right? And if no one's willing to give up anything of their own, like it's not going to happen. It's impossible. So, you know, I think it has to be a global shift in consciousness and an effort towards, you know, not only focusing so much on ourselves, but, you know, making as much of an effort to focus on, you know, people around us, and not only our families and you know, friends, but people in the world who are miles and miles away across many different seas who need it the most. And again, I don't know how this can happen, and I don't know why you know, a lot of you know, this is being not talked about enough, but it's been around for a long time. But I do have a hope that this is gonna change at some point, and I don't know what it is with the whole, you know, pandemic situation, the whole global economy, and whatever is happening. I just have a feeling that sooner or later something big is going to happen, whether, you know, it's the economy, you know, collapses and a new system comes and is birthed into place, or whatever, like big riots or even worse, pandemic or something like that. But I just feel like there is something that is coming, and it's going to be big. And I think that instead of taking that as a way to become even more, you know, shelled off, you know, and closed off from the rest of the world, I hope that, you know, that brings us even closer together on a global scale and makes us more willing to share all the wealth that and the love that we have, you know, available to us. So yeah, that's wishful thinking, but I do believe that, you know, hopefully that
No,
this will happen.
I think it's possible. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
You know, I made a video the other day, and not to repeat myself for anyone listening, but I'm under the belief that we as individuals can change the world. I'm under that belief stringently. But I personally feel that to do that, can't think your way through it, because I have witnessed it in my own life. There's a higher power can lead you to stuff that you can't even comprehend is going to be part of your life and is going to bring changes that you can't comprehend. If you came to me 10 years ago and said any of this, what happened to me was going to happen, I just said no, you know, through a cloud of marijuana smoke, because I was 25 as well, you know what I mean? Like, no, I don't think so. But I really believe in the idea. I try not to use too much religious terminology, because I know a lot of people put off by it, to become a living sacrifice. And what I mean by that is to allow the present moment to guide you, because in that present moment is where you find God. And that's what I did. I emptied myself in Tanzania, and I just said, okay, let me be my good. There's got to be something you can do with this that I'm not doing right with it. Now, in the video I made the other day, I said, imagine if the whole of my YouTube, I get like 5,000 views if I speak about certain topics, normally about 3,000 at the moment. But imagine if 5,000 people who watch me all did that at the same time, hypothetically speaking. And all of them went and were called and followed these synchronicities, these coincidences, this guidance from spirit. They followed it to Tanzania at the same time that I did. Now imagine they all built a ShareTanzania. If everybody had done that, there would now be no more child labor, there would be no more street children, and every child without a parent or guardian would have a family home. And all the stray dogs would be dealt with as well. If only 5,000 of us had gone to one country to do that, to create those bridges, to create the bridge between the places where they can get the help from persons who have the ability to send the help but have no way to send it. And that's why I can see that it really is on the individual. But then you have to just have some faith and trust that the collective is going to sort itself out. And the collective is not your business. You don't need to try and wake up the collective. You don't need to try and tell the collective to do this or that. You just need to trust it and follow your calling. Calling, like yours is making people healthier and fitter and protecting the environment, protecting animal rights. You've found your original calling, and you've allowed your voice to reach great many people. If everybody can just do that in their own original sense, and at the same time they'll believe and have faith that, you know, everyone else is going to find theirs, and all of those add up to the greater good that we want to see. And that's honestly my strict belief, is just that if we kind of ourselves as a living sacrifice to that call, that present moment, we'll all find things can, but we all just do it our own little bit at a time. Because many of us are screaming at this massive system, like, "Ah, this is dreadful," and we just it's like screaming at a wall. You're like, it's not,
Yeah.
nothing's happening. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's, nothing's happening. It's just people shouting at it. But if they individually go and change things, I mean, our village will be our village would have been well on the way to off the grid had this pandemic not kicked in. But our community will be off the grid soon. And if the NGO's projections are right, we'll grow to such a scale. I'll be able to sit with the East African Union, discuss with them about education and about changing the education in East Africa to incorporate culture so that everyone can grow their own food better rather than teaching them about algebra when nobody's hardly going to university, you know, things like that.
Exactly.
And that's just off the back of me getting empty. I'm not really, I don't have academic qualifications to do what I'm doing. And I've been called out on that before. And I say, yeah, it's true, but I can still build a team. And I've built a world-class team around us of accountants and social workers and development officers and stuff of this nature, therapists, nurses, doctors. I didn't, yeah, I didn't have a degree to say I could do it, but what I did have the ability to put myself out of the way and just be present as much as I can. And in being present, I was kind of getting these nudges, and I took those nudges as God. You know, I was, to be a terminology is religion, let you be his hands and feet. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how it happened. I think if we can all do that, or many of us can do that, then it's an absolute piece of cake for the universe to deal with all of these problems. I really do.
Yeah.
I just
Don't
think our belief
underestimate
is
your
in the
power.
wrong place. We're all,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. We're all believing on the wrong system. Everyone's believing the mainstream. You know, we believe it. We're like, oh, you know, this is dreadful. Oh, we're so oppressed. It's like a handful of people telling us that. It's not true. You know, if everyone got together and they got together in front of you, you'd be like, really? Is this is what we're all scared of? We're scared of Bill Gates and his mandatory vaccines and
Yeah.
all of this stuff. You know, it's like crazy, but it's because that's the narrative that the light we take in, the false light, you know, the matrix, to use that analogy. And we
For
just
sure.
believe it. You know, we don't believe on the change. If we all believe on the change, it's easy. I sound silly, but I honestly believe that for the universe to bring, I believe God is a loving father more than me. And thus for the universe to bring the change it wants to bring, it's a piece of cake. But only if you believe on it. If believing on it, it's extremely difficult. And that is what I perceive it to be.
Well, that is a
Passionate on that one.
beautiful, that was a beautiful note to end this podcast on. You know, I think what you're doing is just fantastic. And I want everyone who's listening to this podcast or watching here on YouTube to, you know, learn more about you. And, you know,
Thank you.
if you do want to do that, where's the best way to find you on social media?
You can find me on YouTube, John St. Julian Babawanyama. It's a long one,
Yeah.
birth name and my Tanzanian name. And you can find us on Facebook. Just search for ShareTanzania. ShareTanzania.com for the website. Yeah, you'll find everything off the back of that, I think. So,
Yeah. No,
and
highly
for
recommend it.
anyone from my audience, if you're wondering about John, John has helped me in the past with nutritional advice and so on. So I would advise that you listen to this man at times and take what you can from him because he's a good guy. He's a top guy.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully we get to chat about some new topics that you guys can request in the comment section. You can send us an email at, john@johnvenus.com. And, we'll try to have John back at some point in the future to discuss some more topics.
Sounds good.
And again, don't forget to visit ShareTanzania.com, link in the description box of this video or iTunes, wherever you're tuning in from. And if you can, again, any support and donation is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. Peace out.
Bye, guys.
All right. Success.
Cool.